Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video. So today I got a bunch of affordable newsstand CGC 9.8 comics to recommend. And if we have a look at our trusty newsstand versus directs graph here, you'll find that in 1986, newsstand versus directs, as far as the print runs, were even, 50-50. And from that time, the newsstands really started to trend down as a percentage of the overall print run. Where to the point in 1990, they were 15% of all the print runs were newsstands. So newsstands are just a great way to get a more rare version of a comic book, basically. And we'll focus on this era here where the newsstands really trended down and are pretty great collector items, I would say. So how can you tell the difference between a newsstand and a direct? I'm going to put up some graphs here because it's different kind of per era, but the newsstand editions are always going to have a barcode. And the barcode, the smaller portion of the barcode is always going to have 2 numbers on it. Whereas the direct editions, if they have a barcode, there's 5 numbers on it usually. So newsstand editions always have a barcode. The smaller portion of the barcode always has 2 numbers. And if you see that, that's basically a newsstand edition. Okay, so yeah, just some housekeeping on a newsstand versus direct here, but let's get into some recommendations. I got 7 main ones and a bunch of honorable mentions as well. So first one here, it's a Superman number 75 in the CGC 9.8 in the newsstand edition. This is a good one that you could get for a fair price. And, you know, basically this early 90s comic book was really, some people think of this as like the peak of comic book printing and popularity when Superman 75 came out, the death of Superman. I'm kind of surprised there's not as many 9.8s. I thought there would be way more considering, you know, this is the most well-printed book ever kind of thing. But let's have a look on the census here. And keep in mind on the census, directs and newsstands kind of lumped together. So 874 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. You know, probably about around this time, about 10 to 15% of them being newsstand editions. 51.1% is the CGC 9.8 ratio, so about half of them are 9.8. So not a rare 9.8 or anything. But given all those reasons that, you know, printing in comic books was like at its peak during this time, this was one of the most popular comic books ever. The newsstand edition makes a lot of sense, I think. I saw one sell for $122.50 in the 9.8 and up to $165 in the 9.8, yeah, in the newsstand. But one in an auction going for $122.50 I thought was a pretty great deal. So that's a good idea of the range for this one. If you're a Superman fan, if you're kind of nostalgic for this cover, this might make sense to have in your collection for sure. And to get the more rare newsstand makes a lot of sense on this book that was so heavily printed and so popular in the early 90s there. Okay, next one here, we'll talk about an Infinity Gauntlet number 1 in the newsstand edition. Yeah, this is a really cool one to get in the newsstand. This book was almost a lot of the inspiration for some of these Avengers movies that have come out with Thanos in them and everything. And a great George Perez cover on this one in the early 90s. A great one to get in the newsstand. There's a 1,649 9.8s. So a lot of 9.8s, and when you have that, it does make even more sense to get the newsstand version, a more rare version in the CGC 9.8. Prices are still somewhat reasonable too. 31.4%. The CGC 9.8 percentage, so not too bad of a rarity. You know, not getting into anything where you would pay up a lot, but so Infinity Gauntlet in the newsstand saw one sell for $189.99, and that was like a buy it now, so you might even be able to get this like $175. I was under the impression that they're kind of $175 to $200, like that's what I sort of remember them being in the last year or two, just collecting 9.8s in the newsstand. The direct version's about $140, maybe, you know, maybe if you're really patient, you get it into the 130s possibly, you know, if you want it now, $150. But the newsstand, kind of $175 to $200, it's still about that price. And this is an early 90s book too that was pretty heavily printed, and the newsstand makes a lot of sense during this era. Okay, next one is a great one, an Uncanny XMen 248 in the newsstand edition. This is the first Jim Lee art on X-Men, and to think about what Jim Lee ended up doing with X-Men, with you know, the early 90s X-Men comics were so popular during the time. So it really makes sense to, you know, this is a key issue for sure. Jim Lee's first art on X-Men. In Uncanny XMen 248, a cool one to consider in the newsstand. It's going to be pretty tough to find. 294 CGC 9.8s in the blue label. That's not a lot of them. I would say, yeah, probably about 15 to 20% of them are newsstand editions of those 294. So it's going to be pretty tough to find this one in the newsstand, but you can. 22.1% the CGC 9.8 percentage. So that was actually a bit surprising. This one's kind of rare in the 9.8 actually, and to get the newsstand version, I think makes a lot of sense. So the normal direct version is like 105. Like I think I saw one in an auction sell for that. Newsstand, I wasn't seeing any sell, and I think that's kind of made me think of that. This one's probably pretty tough to find. Not seeing any in the newsstand sell on eBay. But 150 to 175 is my feeling on the price. If the direct is about 100, it's like 105 I saw one sell for. So 150 to 175 I think makes sense for the newsstand. Maybe even get it like for 130, 140 if you're lucky in an auction. But Uncanny XMen 248, if you're a Jim Lee fan, it's 1-to-1, and I kind of want this one in the newsstand. Definitely makes sense for this era. Okay, next one here is a SpiderMan number 13 CGC 9.8 in the newsstand. This is a really cool one, and some of the prices are just crazy on this. And this is going to give you a really good idea of, I was talking about kind of like a newsstand bubble thing that happened like 2 months ago, where somehow just it appeared like everyone just realized newsstands were really popular and were paying up a lot for them. We'll get into some prices here in a sec, but SpiderMan 13 is such a cool one to get in the newsstand. You know, Spider-Man was so popular with the Todd McFarlane art, so these were heavily printed. The newsstand makes sense. In the 9.8, there's 701 CGC 9.8s in this one. With the black costume Spider-Man 1 homage. It is well collected, and I kind of, this one I almost prefer over the number 1, and yeah, we're going to talk about the number 1 in a second here, but Spider-Man number 13 is kind of my maybe other pick, alternative pick to number 1, and it's well collected. 56.5% the CGC 9.8 ratio, so not too rare in the 9.8. But interesting. So I saw one of these, and I remember a few of these selling in the last year, let's call it, in the newsstand edition, CGC 9.8. I saw one sell for 105, and I remember a few like 105, 115, and I always thought like that's a pretty cool one to get in a newsstand, I think. So, the newsstands really heated up like a month or two ago, and there was an auction that ended in this one at the mid-December, it was like December 15th, I think it was, on eBay for $419.96. So that is like the definition of a bidding war right there. Like, there's not too many of these in the newsstand edition. This was a newsstand edition, all the prices. But literally, it was not even a month before that one sold for $105 in the CGC 9.8. One going for $419.96. I think you can still try to get this one under $200 for sure. So something to say for the Spider-Man books. They're all pretty cool in the newsstand. So I got some here. I've had these since I was like super young. But these are kind of two of my favorite covers from the first, 10 to, I think it's 13 or 14 issues McFarlane does. So any candidate of whatever your favorite cover is out of the Spider-Man McFarlane run in the newsstand is a pretty cool collector item, I think. So whether it's Spider-Man 13 or Spider-Man 6 or 7, which I just brought up here, I think they're pretty cool in the newsstand. Okay, next one on the list is a really cool newsstand 9.8. It's a Venom Lethal Protector number 1 in the newsstand in the CGC 9.8. Yeah, I was really surprised to see how many 9.8s in the blue label there were for this one. I've heard this one's not rare. It's super, easy to find in the 9.8, and that's really true. So the newsstand does really make sense on this one, being a little bit more rare version. 4,673 CGC 9.8s for Venom Lethal Protector number 1. Yeah, so that is a lot. I think, no, Spawn number 1, there's more of them. There's more Spawn number 1s, but that is like almost one of the most CGC 9.8 comic books out there. The most 9.8s out there for an issue. 61.3% the 9.8 percentage. So for an early 90s book, it's not that rare in the 9.8. Of all graded copies, 61.3% of them are 9.8. So it makes sense why there's so many. So this one makes sense in the newsstand. For a while there, a couple of people I remember on the team telling me like they bought this one around like 160, 170. And I thought like over the last year, and I thought that was a really good deal over the last year or two. And what was it? Seeing a few sell for that 180 range, but lately actually a couple people paying 250 for this one. So Venom 2 is coming out. 250 seems a little bit expensive given the price history of this book, and there's a lot of them, even though this is in the more rare newsstand. So hopefully closer to 180 in this one. And the newsstand version, if you really like this one, you're nostalgic for this one, it does make a lot of sense. Okay, next one here is a really cool one that might be pushing the affordable budget here with this one, but it's because it's pretty rare in the newsstand, I think. It's an Incredible Hulk 377 CGC 9.8 newsstand edition. So you don't see these very often. I wasn't actually seeing any completed listings, so we'll kind of guesstimate about the price, I guess, here. But 433 9.8s overall with the directs and the newsstands lumped together. 29%, the 9.8 percentage. Not too bad. This one's pretty rare in the direct, pretty, not that expensive in the direct. It's affordable in the direct. I would say right around 120s fair, 110, 120, maybe even get it close to 100 in the direct version of this one. But the newsstand does seem to be elusive. I wasn't seeing completed listings, as I said. I would imagine, myself, this is kind of one that you don't see the newsstand a lot. So if I just happen to see one in Canada for like about $225, I would say, I would be super tempted. Yeah, I think right around 200 is a great deal for Hulk 377 newsstand 9.8. But even 225 to 250, I could totally see someone paying. Like if Lethal Protector 1, people are paying $250 for that in the newsstand, definitely Incredible Hulk 377, people will pay $250 for this in the newsstand. I think it's a lot more rare than the Lethal Protector newsstand. And maybe if you're right into newsstands, you might be kind of yelling at the screen right now. This one might be pretty rare, and maybe it's like $400 in the 9.8. But it just one from that early 90s. That's a great key issue. It's first new Hulk, like Professor Hulk, and in the newsstand, it's pretty tough to find. There's only 433 9.8s, and like I would say almost all of them are directs. Maybe 5 to 10% of them are newsstands. Okay, last one here is a cool one. Yeah, and I brought out my SpiderMan number 1, the gold edition, just in the direct version, this one. But the SpiderMan number 1, I want to talk about seeing some really good prices for the Polybagged number 1 version in the newsstand, and just the sort of normal green cover, so not the silver or the gold. But yeah, I was seeing some great prices for this one. I thought it was more expensive personally, and I think occasionally some do sell for a little bit of a higher price. But if we have a look for this Polybagged edition of just the normal cover, there's only 192 9.8s out there. And it might be because this is the Polybagged edition. I'm wondering if maybe they're all in the newsstand. Probably not. Yeah, I saw 3 of them sell from the same seller though, but 192 of this Polybagged edition, and I'm pretty sure the newsstands and directs are clumped into that 192 number. 28% of all graded copies are CGC 9.8s. So I saw 3 go from the same seller in auctions. I think the most sold for $132.50. So I sort of was under the impression that this one was probably close to 200 or maybe even over. For SpiderMan number 1 in the newsstand version, most of them you see are just the directs. But $132.50 I think is a great affordable price, and I think that would be pretty tough to get right now. Those were kind of auctions that just popped up, no reserve. And I think probably even up to $150 in the CGC 9.8 for one of these SpiderMan number 1s in the Polybagged newsstands. I think that would be worth it, up to $150 in the 9.8, maybe even a little bit more these are just kind of cool in the newsstand. The whole Spider-Man run of McFarlane in the newsstand are pretty cool ones to consider. Okay, so that's my top list. We'll got into all those details, looked on the census and the prices. Let's just get into some honorable mentions, and I think for most of these I've maybe touched on them in prior videos here in the past month or so, but they're still great affordable newsstands in the 9.8 or in the raw too. Like all these, definitely consider them in the raw. I was looking at some raws and they're really cheap. Like in the raw, the price differences are way less than CGC 9.8 newsstand edition prices. There's quite a big difference in most. But okay, honorable mention number 1, a Batman 457. Yeah, this is the first appearance of Tim Drake as Robin, kind of the first official appearance, I guess. And in the newsstand, this is one I got. Yeah, I brought it out on one of my prior videos here. I got one in the CBCS 9.8, but this is one to consider. And I think it was around 130 to 140. One sold for in a CGC 9.8 newsstand version. So that'll be the price to aim for a Batman 457. Next one here, SpiderMan, Batman, Disordered Minds in the newsstand. I saw a newsstand version of this one, and this is one I've kind of considered picking up in the direct for like 90 or $100, but I saw the newsstand one, and I think it was a best offer, and I think it was like 189 or best offer, and I think he wanted like 160. I can't remember if I tried to send a bid, but it was a little bit too much. But I think this one around kind of 150 to 160 in the newsstand is a really cool one, and I bet there's not very many newsstands in the CGC 9.8 of Spider-Man, Batman, Disordered Minds. And you get, Joker and Carnage are the villains in this one, Disordered Minds, plus Spider-Man and Batman in the same comic. It's a cool one. All right, next one, on XMen number 11. Yeah, so we talked about that first Jim Lee X-Men art key issue. XMen number 11 is one of my favorite Jim Lee covers. Bob Wycheck also on the cover on this one, on the cover teaming up. I have this one in the direct, but it's such a good one to think about in the newsstand. It's from the early 90s. Newsstands are great during this time, and it's one I've considered. I got the direct. It'd be really nice to get a newsstand in the 9.8 to kind of pair up with that one. X-Men number 25, the next one. I like this one a lot. It's when Magneto rips out Wolverine's adamantium, and there is a newsstand version for this one. There's quite a few newsstands in the Raw online, I had noticed. But in the 9.8, you could probably get this kind of on a stealthy newsstand. It's one where I'm pretty sure the barcode is on the back cover. So, this is probably one where, maybe you pick up this newsstand almost for the same price as the direct, maybe a little bit more if it's sort of known on the listing for sure. But one to consider for sure, X-Men 25, when Magneto rips out Wolverine's adamantium is a cool key in the newsstand. Next one, Wolverine 24. This is a Jim Lee cover too. I've saw it, throughout my couple years here collecting 9.8s a lot. Saw this one sell for pretty good prices in the 9.8 newsstand. This is kind of my favorite Jim Lee cover of the Wolverine run. There's 2 or 3 others that I think most people like 27 more. That might be a little more expensive in the newsstand, but 24 I find I like it the most, and it's kind of an underrated Jim Lee cover of his Wolverine run. And in the newsstand, I think I remember a lot of them selling around 120 to 130, and I think that's doable. Although probably pretty hard to find. There's not going to be a lot of this one, but one to think about in the newsstand. We'll talk about here an Uncanny XMen 350. Yeah, I recently just talked about this one and recommended it on a video. It's a cool kind of late 1990s one. And I had mentioned on that video that I almost purchased one in the newsstand, the non-foil, because this one is a foil cover, but in the newsstand non-foil version is kind of a cool one if you're the biggest fan of this book. I mentioned on that video I sort of was best offering around 160, 170, and he didn't want to go below 190. And I just didn't want to pay up that much for this book. That's not really a key issue, although there's not a lot of those newsstands in the non-foil. I think it was 30-something in the 9.8, so that would have been a one of 30-something for like $190 that guy wanted. That's not too bad if you're right into this one. So the newsstand version is a more rare version of Uncanny XMen 350. It's a cool one to consider. Okay, last one here is probably not that affordable. I think this one would go for pretty big bucks in the 9.8, but in the Raw, definitely one to think about. A Batman 404 in the newsstand. Yeah, so year 1, part 1, and a huge Batman key. One I got like in the direct edition. I got 2 CGC 9.8s and a CBCS 9.8 of Batman 404, but they're all direct editions. I don't see this one that much in the newsstand edition. Definitely pushing the affordable angle here. The directs go for about 200 to 225 right now. So I think if a newsstand popped up in this one, I don't see them very often. I'd probably pay like $400 and buy it now pretty much. I think that would be fair for Batman 404. In the Raw, you can definitely get the newsstands for really similar to the direct version, but one to keep an eye on. That's pretty rare in the newsstand. That would be cool, but maybe not as affordable. Okay, that is all the honorable mentions as well. I'll get a full list in the description below of all the main recommendations and the honorable mentions too. But this is kind of a cool niche, I think. Yeah, I was just thinking that, to get a sort of rare type of thing, but at an affordable price is kind of cool. And right in that era of the late 80s and early 90s, you can, think about some newsstands that are getting pretty rare, but in sort of admittedly kind of minor keys. They're not, the biggest keys, then they're not affordable usually in the newsstand. But these ones just make really great collector items. And I've, again, collecting throughout the past couple years here, have just saw quite a few newsstand CGC 9.8s from this era and just been like, that's a pretty good buy. Like that SpiderMan 13 at $105 in the newsstand 9.8. Pretty great buy, a bidding war breaking out, going for $419 in that one. And that's probably going to be the ultimate max for that book for a really long time. But you could say that for a lot of these books. Just really cool collector items in the CGC 9.8 newsstand editions. Okay, so hopefully you got some ideas. Thanks so much for watching. If you haven't already, I would invite you to join the team and subscribe to Team CGC 9.8. Yeah, I'd love to have you on our comic book collecting and comic book investing team. Hit the bell for all the latest notifications. Add me on Instagram and Twitter too. All the links in the description below. But thanks so much. Just pretty cool to talk about a Superman book too. I think, if you're going to get one Superman book from the 90s, Superman 75 is probably the one, and the newsstand's pretty cool. But some cool ideas for everyone today. So thanks so much for watching, and really appreciate all the support. And I'll see you on the next one.